Bonjour and guten tag. Thanks for tuning in to another episode on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian, and today we're taking a look at an 1882 pattern Swiss service revolver, hence the French and the German. Now, a lot of people look at these and assume that they're somehow related to the Russian Nagant revolvers, because they do look vaguely similar, but they're not. As it turns out, a lot of these European late 1800s service revolvers have a lot of similarities, especially aesthetic similarities. A lot of them, if you squint a little bit, all look the same. This, however, really has much more in common with the French 1873. It's a chamallow Delvine style of action. Much more of that than the Belgian Nagant or the Russian Nagant. Although what's interesting is the Swiss chamallow Delvine and the Swedish Nagant revolver basically have interchangeable ammunition, but that's a separate issue. Now, the Swiss started their revolver work in 1872 with a rimfire revolver in 10.4 millimeter. They only made about 900 of those. I guess they didn't need a whole lot. They went back in 1878 and they redesigned it for centerfire cartridge. They made 5,500 or 6,000 of those 1878 centerfire 10.4 millimeter revolvers, and they updated virtually all of the rimfire guns to centerfire. But then the Swiss military decided that it would really prefer a smaller cartridge. It didn't need that full-size bore. It may have been that originally they were looking at something that would match the 10.4 millimeter bore size and thus some of the tooling for their 10.4 millimeter Vetterli rifles, early bolt-action, tube-fed black powder rifles. Well, by the 1880s, the Swiss were transitioning into a smokeless powder 7.5 millimeter cartridge for their rifles, and they did the same thing with the pistols. Now, the cartridge that they came up with for this revolver is a really pretty wimpy little cartridge. It's about a 107 grain bullet traveling at about 650 feet per second, which makes it less powerful than .32 auto, less powerful than the French 8mm Ordnance revolver cartridge, less powerful than 8mm Nambu. It really is kind of a pipsqueak round. Clearly, the Swiss didn't consider this a mainline infantry weapon the way, say, the American or the British militaries might. Instead, this was more of an officer's sort of token, sidearm, last-ditch sort of thing. Not really meant for frontline fighting. That said, these are fantastically well-made revolvers, as you would expect from Swiss production. So, I mentioned this is a model of 1882, and these were manufactured clear through the 1930s. In fact, in 1929, they simplified the design to make it a little cheaper, and they kept on manufacturing them, the 1882/29 variety. These would actually see service until decades after World War II, despite the fact that they were a pipsqueak revolver, and of course that the Swiss had been one of the very first countries to adopt a self-loading pistol. They adopted the Luger in 1900 or 1901. However, they didn't really need Lugers for everybody. The infantry officers got Lugers, but the guys who were kind of in the rear echelon, the guys who were in the transportation divisions and the garrison divisions, maybe the artillery divisions, they didn't really need that, top-of-the-line sidearm. That top-of-the-line sidearm was expensive. A Luger would cost the Swiss government something like 225 francs, where this guy cost about half that, 120. So a lot of the officers in rear echelon divisions, especially non-commissioned officers, the slightly lower rank guys, they got revolvers until clear after World War II, because they just didn't need anything more expensive. That said, for 120 francs, you really got your money's worth on these things. They're fantastically well-made guns. Double action. They do not have a swing-out cylinder, but they do have this cool Abadie style loading system, where when you open the loading gate here, it disconnects the hammer, so you can then use the trigger to rotate the cylinder. In fact, on these guys, that's the only way to rotate the cylinder. This does not spin freely when you have the gun at half cock. And when the gate's open, I can't even put it at full cock. So, close the gate. Has a rebounding hammer, as you'll see there, so as long as I hold the trigger, the hammer stays down in the fired position. As soon as I release it, the hammer springs back up. That makes it safe to carry with 6 rounds, a full cylinder. Really, all of the modern developments of a proper high-end revolver are here in this, except maybe the power. The double action pull is not, I'd say smooth, but quite heavy. The single action trigger is excellent. They have this interesting European style of round ball front sight, which we'll show you in just a minute. The cartridge looks a little bigger than it actually is. Doesn't really have the power to back up that case size. But, let's see. We'll take a look at it pulled apart in a moment, but first, let's do a little bit of shooting. All right, let's load this up. So first thing to do is pop the loading gate open, and then I can just drop in a cartridge, click the trigger to rotate it each position, number 5 and number 6. Close the gate, and you're ready to go, either double action or single. There's our ball style of front sight. Really is a heavy double action trigger pull. Ah, there we go. And we got one more. See if I can hit that ball through the camera. Yeah, not quite. Unloading is just as easy as loading. Basically, we have an ejector rod right here, which we will flip all the way out. Open the ejection port once again, and I'm going to run the case out. There we go. Flip that closed. With that port open, you're ready to reload. As revolvers go, this is really quite the fast loading and unloading one. There we go. We're all loaded, ready to go again. Let's see what I can hit here. Not bad. You know, this dry fire is kind of like it fires normally. It's quite pleasant. The trigger pull is fantastic. The double action trigger pull, that's a stress thing there. You've got to be kind of freaked out and ready to shoot someone to make good use of the double action trigger pull, I think. But single is great. So that's my choice for it. For recreational shooting, just stick with the single action. And just... You know, with a little bit of practice, you could get really, really fast about unloading these things. And reloading them, for that matter. So as you would expect from something with partial German heritage, the Swiss revolvers here are serial numbered kind of obsessively everywhere. Barrel frame, the cylinder's got a serial number, and then all the parts are numbered inside as well. And what's actually kind of interesting is, in addition to the serial numbers, there also is a disassembly order stamped onto the parts. So you can see a number 8 right there. That's number 8 in the disassembly order. Number 1 is the cylinder axis, number 2 is the cylinder, and then you've got all the internal parts. So a couple things to point out here. This has wood grips up to about serial number 20,000. These were manufactured with a hard vulcanized rubber grip with a Swiss cross in it. And then at about 20,000 they switched to wood. Wood was less likely to crack if you dropped it. The guns that were made for private purchase, because these were available commercially from the factory, they were made by both W.F. Byrne and also by SIG. The civilian purchase ones are marked with a P in front of the serial number for private. Now if you find a surplus military one, what you'll find is a serial number without the prefix, but then it will be stamped with a P and a 2-digit number. And that 2-digit number is the year in which it was sold off onto the civilian market. So you'll find P 1950s and 60s mostly. If you were, say, an officer who'd been issued one of these and you retired honorably, you often might have the opportunity to buy your service revolver and keep it. Kind of a cool thing. One other interesting and unusual feature about these is all of these are actually designed for a shoulder stock. It's a combination holster / stock. Colonel Schmidt, who designed this, by the way, same guy as the Schmidt-Rubin, he did design the holster for it, proposed it militarily. It was not adopted, but you will find them for sale occasionally for probably a couple $1,000. They're rare pieces, but they are neat. They have a little metal block that runs through the bottom of the grip here. And despite not being adopted, the frames are all made with a hole, a slot for that shoulder stock. Now, if we look on this side, we'll see a big screw right here. That is your disassembly screw. Now, I didn't think to bring a screwdriver out with me to the range today, which is kind of stupid, but turns out I can use a cartridge case for that. It's just about the right size for that screw slot. So if I pop this screw, it's a captive screw, only takes a couple of revolutions here. The side plate hinges completely open. I can then pull off this grip panel, and there is the complete working mechanism of the revolver. So everything's in there to take apart should you need to. You'll see we have a 5 on the spring here, or on the lever here. We have, what is this, a number 7, I believe, on the trigger. You'll find that all the way through. And then the numbers additionally have the last couple digits of the overall serial number, like this one, 546. So this is a feature you'll also find on, say, the French 1892s and a few other guns of this period. There were a couple basic revolver designs that were copied by a bunch of different countries, and this is the Chamelot Delvin, basically, and this is one of the most popular ones. Now, if we look right here, you can see that when I pull the trigger back, I'm pushing the hammer. If I take the loading gate and open it up, what I have done, and I'll show you this here, this pushes this little finger back, right there. That disengages it from the trigger. So now, when I pull the trigger, I'm operating the hand here, which indexes the cylinder, but I'm not going anywhere, I'm not touching the hammer at all. So that's how this Abadie loading system works. So in total, about 37,000, just over 37,000 of these revolvers were manufactured. So assuming that there is only one serial number range and the private purchase ones just intermittently were stamped with a P when they showed up, this would be made in, this particular one would be a 1918 example. If the private purchase guns are actually a separate serial number range, then I have no idea when it was made, but pretty sure that they're all in the same range, and just the ones that were privately sold were marked with that extra number in front of the serial. Thank you for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. These are really nicely made guns. It's really a shame that the ammunition is basically impossible to find anymore. What I've been shooting is some probably decades old commercial Fiocchi ammunition. They do make it, but it appears they don't import it into the United States because there just isn't enough demand for it. It can be hand loaded. You can make the cases from 3220 brass, so that option's out there if you would like. But you know, if it weren't for the ammo, if this were in something, if they'd made these things in 38 Special, these would be all over the place and people would love them because they're really well-made guns. As it is, if you're looking for something eclectic but high quality, obviously Swiss is always a good choice there, but the 1882 revolver has all the machining, precision, and complexity of an old world project, like it really was, but man, it's well done. So check these out if that's the sort of thing you're interested in. And if you like this sort of content, please do consider checking out my Patreon page. $1 a month from subscribers, just like yourself, who enjoy watching the videos, really goes a long way to allowing me to pick up interesting guns like this, and they're stupidly hard to find ammunition to share with you guys. Thanks for watching.